Hello there, my beautiful, lovely, talented internet friends. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me here today for a video in which we will be discussing some of the things that I would recommend expecting if you want to talk about trauma that you've experienced publicly. Now, I have other videos where I talk about talking to people interpersonally, like relationships, romantic relationships, familiar relationships, like how I've handled talking about trauma in those situations and some recommendations. But I've never really talked at length about what it's like to talk about intensely personal, hard, painful experiences on social media where a video could go out to thousands of people, in a room of people where I am standing up and telling people about the worst things that I've experienced, and they're right there. I started this channel almost 3 years ago now. It was October of 2017. I definitely didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, I know that this is something I want to do. I know that this is something I feel kind of ready to do, and so I'm just gonna do it. So I started this channel and I started talking about trauma, which eventually led to me talking about it in person to groups of people, which I'm really grateful for. But I did want to, I guess, warn would be the wrong word, but just make you aware of some of the things that I have experienced while talking about trauma publicly. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, if you want to become a speaker, if you want to start a YouTube channel, if you want to blog about it, if it's anything along those lines, I'm gonna make a guess that you'll probably run into some of the same reactions as well. So with that being said, I do also want to note that this has been an incredibly positive experience for me. I don't think I can ever stress that enough. The ability to put things into words for other people that also then help me make more sense of them about what I've experienced, to feel like I'm contributing, to feel like I'm saying things that I needed to hear 5 years ago, 8 years ago, is so rewarding, and I'm humbled and grateful for it. And the people that I've connected with, I can never say thank you enough for those relationships, for those experiences, for those connections. This has been such a positive thing in my life, but I think it's good to go into things as realistically as possible, and these were some things that I expected and some things that I didn't. So without further ado, let's dive in and talk about what you might expect if you're gonna talk about trauma on any kind of public stage or forum. Now, I know I said without further ado, I always do that, but I did want to thank our sponsors of this video today, my Patreon members. Patreon is a community where you can support the creators that you care about. I'll leave a link up on the screen and also down below if you're interested. Okay, so the first thing that I would recommend expecting if you are gonna be speaking about things publicly is that people will tell you it didn't happen. People will tell you that your experience is invalid. They'll explain to you why nothing actually happened. Or my favorite, please take that with a lot of sarcasm, is when people just flat out tell me that I'm lying. I get comments from time to time on this channel of people being like, you were never assaulted, that never happened, you're just a liar. And I'm like, you know what? That's hurtful to hear, but also there's nothing that I can do to convince you of that, because this is my experience that I'm sharing, and if you don't want to believe me, I'm not gonna waste a whole lot of my time trying to convince you that my reality is real, that what I have experienced actually happened, because frankly, I don't owe that to you. But if you are like me and having your story questioned, being told that you are a liar, and not being believed are things that hit deep at the core of what you've experienced, it's really important to be aware that they could happen, to have a strategy in place to deal with it when and if it does. The second thing that comes to mind is vulnerability hangover. Now, I think this is an actual thing. I think it actually is a kind of hangover, if I do say so myself. This term was coined by Brene Brown, who's a fantastic speaker and author. But when I post a video or when I give a speech where I'm talking about things that are real and deep and vulnerable and hard to talk about, like they aren't super easy things to just chit chat about, I can do it. I can edit that video, I can hit post, but then almost immediately I have so much regret for doing it. I'm like, oh dear God, what have I done? That was too much. People don't want to hear that. No one's gonna care. What have you done? People are gonna think you're over dramatic and doing it for attention and just all of this. And the same goes for, again, talking to people in person. I can do it. I can get up in front of people, speak about what I've gone through. I'm so grateful and honored to be able to do that. But when I get off the stage, I feel a lot of things, right? A lot of emotions hit at the same time. A lot of regret for what I've done. That was too much, that was too vulnerable. People didn't want to really know that about you. What are you doing with your life? And this is something I've just come to expect. There was a video that I posted in my time, I'm not sure when this video is going live, but I posted it today, where I talk about going and driving around and visiting all the old places and neighborhoods that I lived in and that I drove around in in the immediate aftermath of my trauma and not knowing why I did that and suggesting some ideas, but being like, frankly, I don't know if this is healthy or if this is unhealthy. I just don't know. And I talked about some personal feelings, and those personal feelings weren't resolved. I didn't have an answer for them, so it was vulnerable for me. And after I had it edited, I was ready to publish it. I was like, what? This is stupid. Why would you do this? This makes you look vulnerable. This puts you in a light where people could hurt you. And you shouldn't even really be talking about this. Anyways, again, a lot of things come back for me to no one cares. No one cares about it. Don't hit that button. Don't publish that video. And I've just come to expect that. I've come to know that that is what I'm going to feel, to acknowledge it, and then to do the thing anyways. At least that's what works for me. So if you do talk about public experiences, or if you talk about experiences publicly, know that afterwards you might feel some things. You might not feel awesome, you may feel fantastic, but either in the hours, the minutes, or the days afterwards, I generally sort of have this vulnerability hangover where I feel like I never should have done the thing. And then after that passes, I'm really grateful that I did. Third thing I would recommend to be aware of. Talking about mental health and talking about trauma is something that I believe is becoming a little bit more accepted in our society, though not entirely. And if you choose to do so, there are some people who would tell you that you're just doing it for attention, or you're just doing it for money, or you want people to feel sorry for you, or you want sympathy, and you should just shut up and go home. That's one thing that I've gotten a lot. It never feels great to hear, but also someone's judging my intentions and who I am as a person, like how I function, from a 7-minute video or from a 20-minute speech. It's mostly online that people say that kind of stuff. Those comments in particular for me have taken a lot of mental processing and fighting back against, because again, a huge fear I have is that when I am legitimately struggling, when I'm having a hard time, when I'm talking about difficult subjects that are hard for me to discuss, like bad experiences I've had, I'm so afraid that people don't want to listen and are just listening to placate me and are internally thinking, God, she just needs to shut up about this. Again, this comes back to a fear for me, right? I'm terrified that people, even in my real life, like good friends of mine, will think that I'm talking about having a hard time if I'm in a dark phase in my life, or talking about experiences I've gone through for the attention of it. I do a lot in conversations in real life to try to emphasize the fact that I'm not doing this to get your attention. I'm doing this to educate, or raise awareness, or start a conversation, or share experiences, or connect, or whatever it is. I don't say those things outright, but I try to make that clear in how I present myself, because I'm so scared of it. I'm so scared of people thinking that I am doing this sort of thing for the wrong reason. But at the end of the day, all I can do is evaluate within myself continually, am I doing this out of the right place? Like, is my heart in the right place, to use that term? I do a lot of internal monitoring, and again, the people who are saying those things, they're welcome to their opinions, but they do not dictate your reality. They don't dictate the truth of what's happening. They may think that you're doing it for attention. There may be something you can say to change their mind, and there may be nothing that you can say to change their mind. Either way, it's possible that people might make comments like this to you, and I do think it's important to be aware that that could happen and have some kind of idea of how you might process that. Number 4, people will tell you you should get over it. I really don't like this, because it's something I strongly disagree with. I don't think you should ever tell someone who's experienced a traumatic event, just get over it, because guess what? Psychology doesn't work that way. But some people who are uncomfortable with these conversations, uncomfortable with hearing about difficult things, will just want you to shut up about it. To be honest with you, that is probably the hardest one for me to fight, because I've always felt that way about myself. I felt that way since day one. I've always had this internal monologue going of, Joe, why are you still having a hard time? God, you're really not over this yet? You're really still thinking about this? You're still having a hard time? Like, how dare you? Oh God, you're so weak, you're so pathetic. This is the internal mean voice I have in my head that I've worked very hard to put in its place. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. But when you already have that fear, and then people tell you, you should just move on, you should get over it, it can be hard to battle against. Because for me anyways, what that brings up is I just need to shut up, pretend like I'm okay, and go on with my life. And there have been times in my life where I tried to do that, and I got to very dark and unhealthy places really quickly. I feel like I'm sort of repeating myself with this, but it's been really important for me to keep in mind other people are going to have opinions. They are going to say things. What they say about me from knowing me for 10 minutes online or in person is not necessarily the truth. I think a lot of the times it can be valid to consider it for a moment, but if you know it's something that's not true, if you are doing your best, if you're coming from the best place that you can, there's no reason that those words need to dictate your actions. But I do think, especially if you have fears like I do, know that people are gonna say things that will set them off. know that people are gonna say things that are incredibly hurtful, sometimes intentionally, oftentimes unintentionally. Some people are gonna be mean, some people are gonna try to hurt you with it, but that is a very, very small percentage. Talking about trauma publicly is not easy. It's emotional, it has super high highs and then really low lows, and it's confusing and it's difficult to navigate because there's so much of you involved in that process too, right? You're not just talking about science and education, you're talking about experiences you have had. People will question those experiences, people will make assumptions about why you're doing it, people will tell you you should get over it. You might feel like crap after you hit publish on that video, but I think if it's what you feel is right, you should hit publish anyways, because vulnerability hangover is not fun, but it is worth it. Those are just 4 things that I've recently been thinking about are important to become aware of, are important to consider, because it took me, I want to say 6 years before I could start to talk about any of this publicly, because I knew I was not at a place where I could handle that. I was not at a place where I could handle someone telling me to my face or online, you should be over this by now. Because that was this phrase I was so, oh God, I was really trying to fight against that for myself in my own head, and I knew that I didn't want more people reinforcing that because it would become exponentially more hard to fight. People telling me that none of it ever really happened, that used to really get to me. It doesn't so much anymore because it's something I've been able to process through. But when I started that channel, I did know that that would be one thing people probably would say, because some people end up doing that for a variety of reasons. I will always be an advocate for talking about something if you can, if you are in a safe space to do so, if it's the right time, talk about it, whether it's to someone who's close to you, and if you have the desire, yes, absolutely talk about things on a public stage, create a blog about it, create a YouTube channel, start going to your local Toastmasters chapter and giving little speeches about it, get more comfortable with it, figure out how you want to tell your story and what matters to all of that. I'll always be an advocate for all of that because I think it's so healing, it's so amazing, it's empowering, and it has changed the way I think about myself and my own story. And again, I am so grateful for all of it, but also, especially considering the fact that if you're watching this video and you're a survivor of trauma, we've both gone through some things, right? Sometimes adding more things to that pot, it's just not the right time for it. There were years that I knew that this is something I wanted to do. I wanted to start speaking to groups about it. I wanted to design curriculum to give to churches to educate them better about how to handle people who have been traumatized. I wanted to find some kind of outlet that fit me to do this, but I knew that I wasn't at a place where I could do it just yet because I was still struggling to keep my head on straight. I was still struggling to keep my head above water. If you have that desire, I think that's fantastic. And I don't think that what I've mentioned in any way needs to stop you from pursuing that goal, but it is important to do so while examining where you're at. Is this something that you feel like you can handle at this point? If someone did say something like any of the things that I mentioned or something else that you're afraid of, do you have resources in place where you can process that, where you can deal with that, where you can put it in its proper place, having felt it, just all of that. Yeah, I think it's always a good idea to go in more educated than not, and so I wanted to share a few tidbits of my own experience of talking about trauma publicly. I would love to hear your thoughts on all of this. If you have talked publicly before, what have people said to you that you had a difficult time dealing with, or what are experiences that you've had talking about this sort of thing that you'd like to share with others? I'd love to hear down below. And also, if you are someone who wants to speak publicly about these things, what are fears that you do have? I'll answer as many questions as I can. I'll answer as many of you guys down below. I think it's great if you have that desire to speak. Fantastic. Follow it. So thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you to my supporters over on Patreon so much for continuing to support this channel. I don't take it for granted, and I'm really grateful for each and every one of you. And to you watching this video, thanks for spending a few minutes out of your day here with me today. You could be anywhere in the world doing anything, and you chose to hang out with me for a few minutes, and I really appreciate that. I love you guys. I'm thinking about you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.